some people think, and I completely understand the thought process of doing this, of wanting just to kind of squirrel everything away, just put it into account and just hold it there. And then one day this will be a nice little egg, right? But then when you hear things of maybe the US dollar is going down, or you can't buy as much over a couple of years, would you kind of argue against that point of just storing it away, or do you still think that's kind of a smart way to go?
Yeah, no, I don't think it's smart at all.
Right.
I think you have to have leverage in the money that you're trying to save with different assets that have the ability to outperform inflation.
Right.
When you squirrel it away, you put $100,000 under the mattress, and and all of a sudden you're losing 3 to 4% every single year in buying power. You go 5 to 10 years down the line, you go a 10-year period, all of a sudden let's say you lost 3% a year for 10 years. That $100,000 only has about $70,000 in buying power. That's not good. So but what if I put it into something that is ahead of that, that's making me an extra, 3% a year. Let's say I'm making 6%. So I'm losing 3 to inflation, but I'm actually making 6 on it. So I'm net positive 3% a year. Now all of a sudden, my $100,000 in buying power has $130,000 of buying power instead of $70,000. So the gap is massively different in how you choose to do it. And a lot of times I think people think, well, I'm going to be just super conservative, and I'm going to just save. I'm going to put in cash equivalent type of accounts, right? And we're seeing it right now. We have a record. I think it's over this now, but the last stat I saw is $7.6 trillion sitting in basically in cash equivalent type of accounts, right? And so money market funds, cash accounts, all of those different things. That's the largest amount that's ever been in that type of a sitting on the sidelines, basically. $7.6 trillion sitting on the sidelines. It's not, that money's not keeping up with inflation. And so if I do that long term, my buying power with my dollars, if the dollar is going to go down in value and inflation goes up and the cost of everything goes up, that's not a recipe for success. That's a recipe that is a losing proposition for me. So the longer I'm sitting there waiting, the less buying power I have, the less my money's worth. And sitting under the mattress, that's what happens. Now, if I buy assets, tangible assets, things that are going up in value, if I leverage into those assets, not over leverage, but if I use leverage to purchase some of those assets and I'm in a good position, if those assets can support whatever debt service I have on properties, which is why we love real estate, because the real estate can actually produce revenue to support the debt service. So I have leveraged money into these assets that are going up in value. I have a revenue to pay my debt service. All of a sudden that becomes a winning proposition down the line, where I'm now well outperforming inflation. I'm making some money. So down the line, 5-10 years from now, I've got a lot more buying power. And I can start to parlay that into other assets and other tangible assets. Maybe just build my portfolio of real estate, whatever that is. And so there's a lot of different levers you're pulling. But what happens is we just buy into this narrative that has been written for us to ultimately become dependent on the system.
That's a great word.
And that's all the whoever you want to call it, the higher ups, the elites who wrote all the rules so that we can all be dependent upon them. That's not what you want, in my opinion. No. Right?
You can't do it. You physically, it doesn't make sense. You can't do it. We're looking at the numbers. It's a data-driven decision right here, and it ain't gonna happen.
But
it ain't gonna work.
It's really hard. I've got a call right after this podcast with somebody that says, listen, it's really a hard decision for me to move into a different asset class. I'd like to talk to you about it because, we're following all the rules. We're putting money in the 401k. I've got it into a brokerage account. My financial advisor that runs my account says that we should just keep following this plan. But when I'm looking at the numbers, we're going to be nowhere near retirement, and we're going to hit retirement age in the next 15 years. And I'm not even close.
Wow.
And yet they've got, in this case, they had a decent amount of money sitting in there, but their lifestyle is not going to be supported into the retirement years. And I'm like, man, you could, and what they're wanting to know is talk me into doing something different, basically. Right.
Yes.
And there's a lot of reasons to do something different, but everything you do has risk, everything. And so there's two sides to every coin. And sometimes we will talk ourselves into why we shouldn't do it more than why we should, even though when we write it out on paper and we look at the stats and we look at everything, we can clearly see that the narrative I've been following, the plan I've been following is not working. However, it is familiar to me. and it's familiar to the crowd, the masses. They buy into it. And so I'm not going to get ridiculed for that. I can say, well, I followed the rules and it didn't work out.
Yeah, blame someone else. Yeah.
Blame somebody else. I don't have to take full responsibility. If I take that risk and do something different, if it screws up and if it doesn't work, now it's all on my shoulders.
Yeah.
And I have to shoulder the risk, or I have to shoulder the blame. And a lot of people, they would rather sit in the crowd of, I know this is probably not going to work, but this is what everybody's doing. So I'm going to sit here and watch it just kind of not work out. And because it's comfortable, I kind of know what it is. Everybody else is doing it. I'm okay with that versus taking the risk and doing something different. And it's really, it's interesting to me how hard it is for a lot of people to cross that, you know, and take the chance of betting on themselves.
Yeah. Okay, let me read this. Yes, as of late 2025 and early 2026, there's a record amount of cash, roughly 7.6 trillion to 7.8 trillion, parked in U.S. money market funds. That's from investment company Institute.